Hey, and welcome to another episode of Creative Leaders Unplugged. I'm Morgan, here with Arna, and today we're talking to Ari Elefterin. Ari is water. They are an artist, a designer, a
Mm.
teacher. What else is Ari? A rock collector?
Rock collector. Yeah, well, many things really. Outsider.
Yes.
Outsider was the word that I took from this. We talked about being an outsider, and being an outsider is because it's an important word. I mean, because we are looking obviously at, you know, creative leadership and these patterns
Hmm.
of what is a creative leader, or what is a creative person, or what
Hmm.
do these people all share,
Yeah.
and this idea of being an outsider. And Ari is obviously very a conscious outsider,
Yes.
making that conscious decision. Um, Others might not be so, might not, might not even realize that they're outsiders. Ari did really realize I am an outsider.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that was important because that puts you in a position of seeing things, if from a, what do you call that, a bird's eye view, right? You are in this space in
Yeah.
between, and you can, and I think that is, again, something, when we're looking at patterns, they fitted right into that pattern of, being that outsider, but being happy to be that outsider, and not
Hmm.
even being able to be something else, being happy being outsider. But actually, when I was young, an outsider felt as, that's a negative. That's not a positive. But more and more, the more people we talk to, I'm
Yeah.
starting to feel like, so in a way, actually, during this interview,
Hmm.
I started thinking, we mentioned therapy, and
Yeah.
I was thinking, I think Morgan and I are going through therapy. Because I think
All
this is
these conversations, it really
right,
is.
isn't it?
Really is. Yeah. And
Yeah,
every time, and that's something that Ari also does really well for themselves and also then in their teaching practice. But then also these moments that I'm having during the podcast are these moments of self-reflection and consciousness and awareness. Be like, okay, where am I positioned?
yeah,
Who am I really? What am I learning about myself?
yeah, exactly. And I'm not alone. And
Yeah.
there's so
Yeah.
many people out there that think that way and that feel that way. And in a way, all these people somehow feel as being an outsider, and which might not always make them really, happy or anything. It's not like because they don't fit in or something. It's not always a positive. But the more and more I listen to people and I talk to them and I see them on the podcast, the more I
Hmm.
started thinking, this is actually really, these are the cool kids.
These are the people I
We are the cool kids. But
Yeah,
it
these are
might
the
be a
people I want to hang
self-fulfilling.
out with.
Yeah, these are the people we want to hang out with. Maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe we just invite the people that we feel that we belong to. Maybe that's it. Maybe we should start
But also,
inviting. Yeah, so that could also be true. But at the same time, no, I don't think so. I
no.
think if we people we invite to talk to us, they're quite diverse.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's
We
good
and we
good
make and
therapy.
we've made a big effort to also do that as well, right? Different ages, different nationalities, different backgrounds, all kinds of things. And these are
Yeah.
the themes that keep showing up. And being an outsider is certainly
Yeah.
one of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's cool to see. Cool to see something that's a weakness turned into a strength.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Enjoy the
Yeah.
podcast and
Okay.
yes, self-reflect.
Self-reflect. Yes. Enjoy.
When I think of self in relationship to work, it's so intertwined, especially when, like, as an artist, my artist mind. And then when I think of self in relationship, I think like one of the first things is like, oh, I'm a kind person, or I like to think of myself as a kind person. I really care about my family, all those kind of base human level type answers. But then there's the kind of silly part of me. And when I say, who am I as a person? I'm like, I'm water. I'm sunlight, I'm oxygen, like the kind of fundamental things of like the human body. So I know that's kind of a silly answer, but yeah, I guess if someone new asked that and they'd read all of my CV and they'd, maybe, I think I would just say I am a person who cares a lot about the people in my life and is really interested in beauty in the world and helping others and trying to understand what it means to be human. Yeah. So sorry.
Don't
Fully.
apologize. I love it.
You just asked like the biggest question that you could ask right at the beginning. And I was like,
Yeah, that was it. That was the podcast, by the way. So thank you.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I like that very much, and I think there's a lot to unpack as well for us. But one thing I
yeah.
immediately kind of that struck me in your answer was that your work and your, if your private life,
Hmm.
you don't see that
Hmm.
as two separate things because it's
Hmm.
intertwined, right?
Yeah,
And which I totally recognize, but I do think that we live in a society, in a world where we tell ourselves and others that you keep these, it's normal to keep these things separate. A lot of
yeah,
people will feel that there's work life, there's private and work life, there's, work-life balance, that's important to keep that in balance, as if these are two different things. That's how we, I think, grow up. And this is what I think, teach, not my children, but I think that's what we're teaching children, that you have your job and you have your private life. So, I mean, how did that, so where did you feel like, no, it's the same thing? I mean, or was that something that you were always felt that you could never separate these two?
well, I think that inherently for me, it's always been the same thing. And a lot of when I was first starting off in design or first thinking about what I wanted to do as a career, which never was, I think I always knew I wanted to be an artist of some sort, but I applied for college in political science. I wanted to be a
Mm.
lawyer. I wanted to work for the UN. I wanted to do all of this. But I think that there is always this undercurrent in my life of what my purpose was. And that was always related to art and human emotion and kind of trying to uncover all these things about what it means to be human. And so when I started working, or when I first entered the design world after undergrad, or a little bit before because of internships and things like that, I experienced that split that you're talking about, that balance. And I think that this happens to a lot of most creative people who go off into the creative industry and transition from working on deeply personal work in college and high school to having to work on other people's work and be the vessel that facilitates that. It was very almost kind of violent to me of that like separation and working in the corporate world. And I couldn't make that work, or I didn't really want to. I realized that the social issues that I cared about and the ways that I cared for other people felt quite at odds. And so I guess I just decided that I didn't want to have that separation because it was not within me. And and so after leaving the corporate world, it's been just this kind of organic pursuit of trying to figure out and live a way where it can be connected. And I suppose in that sense, when I say work, I don't mean work for monetary gains,
Mhm.
life's work, creative work, like the work that your, I guess, soul or mind really want to do. And so I think that, like so many artists and designers and thinkers before me, right, who've tried to start these kind of life philosophies or educational systems where it's intertwined. I think like that is kind of where I am in my career and trying to figure out like redefine what work means to me and how those things can be more intertwined. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of,
Did
yeah.
you, I mean, did you have artists, as example for that? I mean, because, you need to kind of, if did you have people who go like, oh yeah, you
Yeah,
can do
good
it
question.
that way as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's been a pursuit of trying to find those people in the way that is similar to mine. I mean, there's like Black Mountain College, there's of course Bauhaus. There's like all those actual educational systems that like merge those things.
Mhm.
And so it has been a journey of kind of like going and looking at all the examples and kind of seeing and pulling from that. I think, I come from a family of artists. I actually come from a family of like scientists and artists where it's like this beautiful balance. And my life growing up was very much that. My grandma was a painter. I would go and paint with her. My mom is studied graphic design. Is just an incredible, like, inherent artist. I always say that, like, my sister and I are her artwork. Like, she's kind of made us into these,
Cool.
everything is like leading up to that. And so, and my mother's mom was a teacher, my dad's a dentist. And so my life growing up was really that. Everything felt so connected and natural and organic. And so, of course, it's easy when you're a child. Your parents are paying the bills, your parents are feeding you. You don't have to think about it. But, so many different things. So I think I've like been trying to really hone and capture that like childlike wonder and see and model it and think about. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of following the example of my grandmother and all of that. Yeah.
It's so
And what,
amazing how much influence. Sorry, Margie, go ahead. Yeah.
well, yeah, I was going to ask about your grandma and about her influence because you just said, keeping that childlike wonder.
Mhm.
And you said that you came from the corporate world before and it was felt quite violent to you in a way. And
Mhm.
childlike wonder is not a word I associate with corporate life.
Mm.
So then how did that become apparent to you? Like well, first off, I guess the first part of the question is, how is childlike wonder a part of your grandma's practice as an artist, as a painter? And then how did that become an apparent value to you that you were like, oh, this is also something I want to infuse into my work?
Yeah, I think that for me, so my grandmother was a painter. She lived all over the world. My grandfather was in the Air Force and they lived all over the world. And she actually taught in university, which at that time was very rare.
Yeah.
She was really lucky in that her father let her go to college and like she studied art. She was one of the only women in her class. It was really beautiful and must have been incredibly challenging, especially she was Greek and so and studying in English, of course.
Mhm.
So I think for me, I really just sat when I was growing up, I sat alongside her and we painted, and it was so natural. And she taught me so much about just looking and seeing the world that feeling that I had of just kind of magic.
Mm.
And that is to me that childlike wonder. And she painted a lot of natural, like the natural world, insects, very beautiful landscape scenes, occasionally vignettes of life, but primarily nature. And that is one of the places where I feel the most comfortable. And so I think that just that feeling of comfort and wonder and really seeing the world and finding beautiful things that you can only see when you really, really look. And yeah, so I think that natural kind of organic component. And it's funny because she told me not to be an artist. I can sit and imagine, sit in her car in the garage. I could probably go there and stand in the exact place that I was. And she said that as a painter, it's much different. These types of careers that we all have now didn't necessarily exist back then. So as a
Mhm.
creative person, you couldn't imagine that. But I remember her like telling me not to be an artist, and me being like, in my little kid mind, being like, well, I'm going to be one anyways, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, then that transition to the corporate world, I was working at Nike. I got hired full time at Nike in global brand design right out of undergrad. I studied graphic design. And I was hired to work in women's training, which is now Nike Women. But I remember being very excited about that because it's like, oh, I'm going to work on, I'm going to be dealing with the perception of women and health and the body on a global scale. That's incredible. I'm like going to help to really advocate for better practices in that, of course, all the things as a young designer that you're really excited for. And I think those types of like really seeing the human and wanting to care about other humans felt so natural and innocent in some ways. I don't think it's innocent at all, of course. I think that that's the way we should be. I think that that's the correct way. But, there aren't, as you said, Morgan, there aren't a lot of chances for that childlike wonder within so many layers of systems and protocols and hierarchy, and sitting at your desk for 10 hours a day or however long, and driving in your car back 45 minutes and all of that. And so I think that that was just like a really immediate response for me of not seeing that. And so just knowing that like with our finite time on the earth, that my energy and those things that I cared about needed to come through a lot stronger. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so, no. So I have a daughter and a son, and so my daughter's 18 and my son is, well, he's going to be 13 in a few weeks. And just also listening to you, right, and I realize also when I think about my childhood, my parents and the influence they had, not just because, not like a very conscious influence, also that, but also just the people they were and how they went through life and the decisions they made and just being them basically. And so me being me and having my kids, I'm always thinking, oh my God, I don't know, what am I, I hope I can, because you have so much impact as a parent, and not only, also their friends and what they go through at school and everything combined, obviously, but just as parents, you are sort of this example of how you can live your life. So it really can make a big difference in how you grow up, basically. And so it's almost confrontational, like, oh, I don't know, what am I doing? Because as a parent, it's not always like clear, like with your grandmother saying, don't be an artist. Because in that time frame, in that moment in time, from her perspective, that wasn't a smart decision. But obviously things change. So I don't know what the future is going to look like. So I don't know if what I teach them now or what I tell them to do, yes, or not do or do, if that's actually the right thing. So that's just a reflection of as a parent. You're like, oh my God, yeah, you have so much influence. But you need these examples, right? You need people around you to show you. To your point, that idea that life, is, you know, the energy and the time you have on this planet. What are you going to invest that time in? But also, I think that's also, I think it's an amazing thought really to have, because a lot of people don't, they just go, they look for security. They look for a place. If you work for Nike, you're happy to be at Nike. You're not going to leave Nike because you don't, because it's your job, just security. So you're thinking of, am I really going to spend my time on this or not? Am I going to do something different? That's, in a way, that's something you're very conscious of, you in this space, you know what I mean, on this planet, right? I'm not sure if everybody is sometimes. Sometimes I think, do people actually know they're here? And how little time they have? What are you wasting your time on? Is that something was that a conscious feeling that you have?
A little. I mean, I think that I have a couple friends, we talk about this sometimes. It's a little bit of like the curse of being an artist. And I keep saying artist, and
Mhm.
I don't call myself an artist or a designer or anything. I don't really care for labels too much in that sense.
Mhm.
It only confuses me. I'm just myself. And so but I think that this is a little bit, we always joke, this is like the curse of being an artist, of there's this extra little thing and that's just pulling you. And it's a compulsive of like needing to get that creative energy or ideas. It's definitely, I always, part of the curse is an ego, of course, that
Mhm.
as an artist, we have to have enough ego to think that our internal world should come into the external world. It should take
Mhm.
resources, people's time, energy, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's big ego. And then also, you're, as an artist, there's like this humility and
Yeah.
all of that. And so, yeah, that tension and the compulsion to need to. And I think that there was just that not giving into that, but feeding that and realizing that that voice was always going to be there. And so why not try to figure out a way to feed that voice as opposed to be constantly fighting against it, because there's so many, with how much information we get every day now and all of the tensions and horrible things and all the things going on in the world. It's like, if I have this gift, or if I have what I think can help other people inside of me, then like we need to figure out a way to make that happen. And of course, for me, a big component of that is teaching. And I always, like, even when I wanted to be a lawyer and all of that, I like always also wanted to teach. I remember being in middle school and being like, I'm going to be a college professor one day. And my
Mhm.
teacher was probably like, what? You're still in middle school. And but realizing and kind of seeing and moving towards a place and collecting knowledge in a way that I feel confident that I can like teach other people to also be themselves. Yeah, I think I got a little off topic there, but
No,
yeah.
interesting. How do you teach people to be themselves?
That's a good question. Teach me.
Yeah.
Teach
Yeah,
me.
yeah, but I mean, it's funny, but that is
Mm.
like the foundation of my teaching methodology, and
Mhm.
something that I've been working so hard to. I mean, I teach product and industrial design in the School of Constructed Environments at Parsons. And kind of sit uniquely like within that department. And just even when I'm thinking about what it means to receive a good design education. But to me, I'm always just trying to teach people to be themselves. And so much of that is learning about yourself. So teaching people to ask questions about themselves in a really open way, in a way that's unafraid, in a way that facilitates risk taking, in a way that allows them to be uncomfortable. And, to me, the most important thing about, and I think this relates to some of the questions, a couple of the questions we just covered, and also kind of where I see design or art and everything in the future. But I think that people can make the biggest impact when they understand what they do best and what they care about the most, and feel supported and are shown or guided or just even like cheered on and being themselves. And so for me, my students, like being the future of design, I'm like, you're not going to have really innovative thinking or risk-taking thinking or things that change the world unless you are operating in a way that is true to yourself and really like comfortable in taking risks. So I think that fundamentally, it's really just knowing to ask yourself questions and being unafraid to step out into a place that is really unknown.
Mm.
And yeah, when I like look back, it's like my parents really supported me I worked really hard. I also think it's teaching people to like work hard on the things that they care about too, and the best ways to work hard on those things. And yeah, when I think about like what allowed me to at least take a few more risks in my career and my life. It's like knowing that there's people that care about you. And so that's also like
Hmm.
being able to reflect on the things in the world that like support you and give you comfort is another way to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do your
Yeah.
students actually expect to be asked those questions?
That's so it's some of them, yes. I've
Some of
been
them.
working really hard to kind of curate a persona of myself within the department. And so now
Mm,
I'm lucky and fortunate enough to get students who sign up specifically for that level. I think that when I teach, the first time I ever taught senior thesis or capstone, they were like, this is, we didn't like think that we'd be getting therapy too. And I'm like, it's
exactly.
not
Yeah, yeah,
therapy. You're giving
yeah.
yourself therapy. I'm just giving you a handout that
That
says
that is therapy.
All the self-reflection.
it is. But thankfully, now I get a lot of the people in our department, or I try to create spaces for people in the department who might not always feel heard in a primarily male dominated field,
Mm,
Mhm.
and also in a field where a lot of the people working are telling what to do, not asking what the future generation wants to do.
mm.
And so I have a lot of students. I'm really fortunate in getting students who are like a little bit hungry to get asked those types of questions. But occasionally I do get classes or groups of students who are not. And you have to earn trust. It's all about trust in that sense, and kind of showing how that can shift your thinking. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And did you always, and because you're showing your students, the power and the benefits that come with knowing yourself and operating in that space and saying, I'm really good at, X,
Mhm.
Y, Z. I'm going to occupy that and go for it. Was that always clear to you growing up? Like, this is the space that Ari occupies and this is what she's going to go for? Like, have you always been comfortable being yourself?
You know, I think yes, in a way. No, I don't, and I think that sounds like I
Mm,
have that I'm like really, really confident, and that
mm,
that's not the case. I think that there's many times when, like anyone, I fully get in the way of myself, and some of the things I need to work on definitely like create barriers. But I feel that I yeah, I've always just like kind of been me, and I like look back and I'm like, oh, of course younger Ari did that. And it's just been about like squishing the like amorphous part of myself into a better shape, and kind of like pulling and pushing on different things. I think I've like have always been quite fueled by challenges too, and life is
Mhm.
like full of so many of those things. So a lot of that is kind of, been learning about myself through those. Yeah, I think I've always been myself, but that doesn't mean that I haven't had a hard time.
Well, isn't it
Yeah.
always, I mean, or at least the ideal situation is, I mean, I mean, no one's perfect. I mean, that'd be
Mm.
scary because if you are, that's really weird, which makes you imperfect again. So there you go. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so isn't it about accepting that, you're not perfect and things,
Mm.
sometimes you struggle with things and etc. So I think it's about accepting that that is who you are, and
Mm.
so you can
Hmm.
be sometimes frustrated with yourself and angry with yourself or what have you, but in the end accepting that that is part of who you are really does kind of, I don't know, at least give you some kind of a permission to be who you are. And I think
Mm.
often
Hmm.
we don't give ourselves that kind of, we're not kind to ourselves when we make mistakes. A lot of people I know are too hard on themselves. Where they go like, yeah,
Hmm.
but just, accept yourself and give yourself that permission to make those mistakes. And
Hmm.
or give that permission to be angry with yourself. At least for, that's how it's a bit of a paradox maybe, but I feel that that's, for me, it's at least the best way to go to deal with my kind of my issues, where I go like, don't take myself too serious. Right. It's
Mhm.
yeah, you are who you are. It's you go through life. It's complicated. And, and it is amazing that we actually are managed to, deal with this system around us, and we can actually, even sometimes thrive in it. It's amazing that we
Mhm.
get anything done, really, if you think about it.
Yes.
Yeah, right. You have to do so many things. We have to live, we have to have food, we have to have a job, we have to have a roof above our heads, we have to have all these
Pay our
things,
bills and brush our teeth. It's
brush
never
our teeth.
ending.
It's never it's never ending. Exactly.
Yeah.
Have friends and care for your family and no, but it's seriously, it is a lot, right? And then
Mhm.
be on social media. So actually, sometimes I would go like, oh, really, it's too much. But it is too, I think for a lot of people nowadays, maybe more than it used to be. I don't know, I can't compare it, but it is a lot, right?
Mhm.
And I can imagine that students who grow up in this time of social media and all the noise out there, the way you should behave and the way you should look like, and what is
Mhm.
success, what does it look
Mhm.
like, and all that pressure that's kind of on these young people. I think in a way what you're doing is, I mean, you might not want to call it therapy, but I think it's not just for young people. I think it's for all of us. It's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
moment in time where we go like, wait a minute, who are we actually? What are so this I was just talking to a good friend of mine, and he's all into embodiment. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting where because it makes so much sense to say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what is the thing you have? It's your
Mhm.
body. What is the thing you have? This is what we have. And the more technology takes over everything else, this is what we have. And how
Mhm.
do we take care of that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's not just a
Yeah.
meat cage for our brain, believe it or not.
No, your brain is all over your body. Your body is your brain.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
Um,
and so there's a book. Sorry, I'm getting really like no. There's a I forgot the name of the book, but it describes how your thinking actually takes also plays outside of your brain. It's basically it is this idea that your context, where you are, with whom you are, what you're getting exposed to, is part of your thinking. So basically, it's not just inside your skull, because basically your brain is not really doing the thinking. It's actually everything around you. So your senses, what you feel, what you smell, what you hear,
mhm.
everything is part of your thinking. To me, that was such an eye-opening thought. Like, oh yeah, again, like duh. Of course, if I'm in a sunlit room or in a dark basement, everything that will influence my thinking and the way I feel.
This this week I learned that there's been studies done that when you're sleeping, you can still tell when somebody's watching you, even when you're
Ooh,
sleeping.
really?
Yeah.
Different level. Yeah, all the levels of perception. I feel like I mean, there's a few books like literally right behind me that are talking. I'm like, are you talking about the like Noah book, Action and Perception? Maybe there's so many things that are like
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about that, and that is coming so much into like the design, art and design world, like being
yes.
talked about way more. Yeah. I was thinking as you were talking, I want to come back to that because embodiment and like the mind and the senses and everything is what I'm thinking about all of the time in my work. But I want to quickly, I was thinking while you were speaking too about another part of the answer to Morgan's question about like being yourself or knowing
Mm.
yourself. And I think that this relates actually to like the knowledge in the body of I talk a lot about affordances in all of my classes, of course, like action possibilities. So, like all the objects around us hold all of the possibilities of interaction. And I, while that is primarily spoken about in product and industrial design, and then, like, of course, UX and UI now, but I like to think of like our bodies. So, knowledge is transferred through DNA, of course. And so much of what we do is, and then this isn't an argument about free will or not free will or anything, but so much of how we are in the world is encoded through our DNA, and we are kind of interpreting that through our own perception as our mind grows. But when I answered that, I think I've always known myself or always been myself. I think I actually view it as like of knowing and learning more about yourself is like uncovering new affordances. So making new discoveries within you. And I like
Mm.
to think about it as like turning over rocks. That's because I really love rocks. But it's like you're inside and you're like in your body, and new experiences and new questions that are being asked are you like uncovering little rocks within you that have always maybe been there, and it's just finally activated by some new experience or new sensation. And so I think that when I say like, oh, I've always been myself, it's like all of those possibilities, future and past and present, and all kind of like are there. And I'm just like navigating that through as I go. And then thinking about these questions of like embodiment and the senses and all of that, I think that way and thinking about this kind of hybrid of like, I think sometimes it sounds really spiritual, a lot of the like discussion about embodiment and
Hmm.
all of that often in the design world context will get discredited, or
Yeah.
it used to pre-COVID. I like
Mm.
I was doing work pre-COVID on touch hunger, skin hunger, touch starvation, and I had such a hard time getting a lot of the like I'll just say male professors, traditional
You'll
product
just
industrial
say it.
designers to like understand
Yeah.
this. And I spent so much of my time educating, and then I'm like telling everybody facts about skin as an organ and what, touch deprivation has only been studied in failure to thrive in infancy and solitary confinement in prisons. And I'm doing all of this work. And then like we have the pandemic and
Mm.
lockdowns, and then everyone's experiencing. And I was like, this isn't a great time to say I told you so, but
I totally
remember when
understand.
I was like telling
Yeah.
you to like, be in your body, and like what does your body want to do when you're making, and how
Well,
does
that's
it
an interesting. That's
yeah.
interesting. Do you think the sort of the pandemic sort of changed the conversation? That speed up that thinking?
Yeah, I think that
Oh,
everyone,
never thought about
yeah.
this.
Oh, in a huge, I mean, completely, it wasn't talked about before. And
Huh.
now so many of the student projects, so many people are speaking about this.
Wow.
And not maybe in like, yeah. And I think that it's like everyone, like the relationship between this like isolation, the communication between using technology to mediate so much of our communication,
Mm-hmm.
seeing the links between a disconnect from the body and like increase anxiety, depression, all of those sorts of things that can happen from that. I
Mm-hmm.
think people were finally able to be faced with the see that connection was like revealed.
Yeah.
And whereas primarily it was like they would only really experience those things maybe if they were taking yoga classes or meditation classes, that sort of thing. Now it's like a little bit more on, I was studying this before the pandemic, and there were no articles about skin hunger. There were like
Mm.
a few. Now, also, touch is the least studied of all of the senses because it is the most like mercurial. It's, one person can get touched in a part of or the same person can get touched one way, the exact same way, with the exact same amount of pressure in the same place, one moment to another moment, and it'll feel completely different because of the
Mm.
context. So,
Mm.
Mhm.
everyone, it's so different for everyone. It's difficult to communicate that. So, when else in our minds of history did we have such a universal experience of isolation, of like, that was such about as close to a universal experience in terms of everyone having their bodies exist in space in a closer way. And so I think that connection definitely like revealed a lot of those
Well, I'm really
things.
glad to hear that in this. I mean, because
Yeah.
I was so well, because I've always been hoping, naively felt a little bit, that we would really learn something. And kind of quite quickly after sort of the pandemic was kind of, officially ended, I felt that we forgot all the lessons really quickly. And it's
Yeah.
such a disappointment. But I do think there's, things like this, which you were talking about. I
Mhm.
do agree with things did change. I don't think we appreciate what has
Yeah.
changed, and we haven't really made that. It's not that explicit, but I really hope that a lot of, you know, if there's research done on this sort of, because of course things change. It was a great, amazing, and intervention into the way we lived, and it's
Hmm.
this amazing thing really that as designers we create these prototypes, these interventions, and to learn from what actually what will emerge if we stop all this, or we create a completely different experience, or we do these experiments. And we must have I've learned a lot from it, but as a sort of a society. And to your point, I think part of that is this, yeah, this deeper understanding, because we've all experienced it, that if you cannot connect, and not only physically like touch, but also just being in the same space. I mean,
Hmm.
there's so many horrible stories. Just if you can only be on the phone, or or on a video conferencing with your parents, with your elderly parents, or something like
Mhm.
that. That's a huge difference, right? We know this, and I don't know. So I'm good to know that
Yeah.
the conversation shifted.
Well, I think that this is like one of the things that's been hard for me, or something that I've learned. I mean, I'm still quite young, but something that has been like slowly revealing itself is just how long, I mean, I think how long it actually takes to make change. And
Mm.
so, you know, that was revealed to us so widely. So many people experienced it. And then we like Zoom and everyone like tries to go back to normal.
Mhm.
And there's still like, even if there's like 25 or like 10% more articles written about it than there were before,
Yeah.
the designers and the artists and the doctors and like it's like everyone thinking about that is like making small incremental process. And I'm
Mm.
seeing more people talk about the senses. I'm seeing more people talk about what it means to have a body. And it's like expanding slowly. And so it's like thinking about change happening on like a longer term scale,
Mhm.
and being
Mm.
comfortable with that has been really hard. But yeah, I think about like that, the question, like what you're talking about is something that I think really like fueled my desire to teach too, in that seeing all these places where change could happen and all these things that are happening to people and negative, like in the corporate world or in design or to women. And if I'm like going back to like working in the women's division, Nike, and I was like, okay, all of these designers are so talented. Everyone's so talented, so brilliant. They also see the problems that are here, but like, and they could make the change, but they're not, because they're still within the context and they're still struggling with all those things of,
Mm.
you know, supporting their families and doing all of those things. And that was like, I was like, okay, if I go back to teach, the place that I can make change is teaching the future designers to
Yeah.
be more resilient to those, that maybe once they get into managerial positions, like they know better patterns of behavior. They have been like revealed these potential issues in the future. They know themselves better, and like all of that kind of fortifies you and like motivates you. And so I was like thinking about, okay, so my change in design is like training all of these designers, and then they go out. And I'm like, that change doesn't happen until they're like 30 also. So
Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah.
been having to think about it like in the long term, and that
Yeah.
thinking like helped me at least to feel a little bit more optimistic about this. Like, I don't know, it's the immediacy of issues plus the long-term changes. I mean, that's like, then you're also
Yeah.
confronted with the fact that you're a tiny speck in the long timeline of human history. But,
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a really interesting, hang with me, I'll connect it all back. I had a
right.
really interesting discussion with somebody, and they were arguing for the idea of like being pro-monarchy. And,
Mm.
of course, I'm like, what do you mean? And their argument was that monarchies had to think about themselves in terms of generations, where politicians have to think about themselves in terms
Yeah.
of right now. I just need to be reelected in this next cycle, which is in 6 months, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, where then monarchies are thinking about, okay, what are my future generations? And so it also changes how they would make decisions. And this person was far more historically knowledgeable than I was. So I was just sitting there in awe. But I was like, that's also a really good point, because when we think just about like the short term payoffs, of course there's things to be had, there's things to be won there for sure. But then if we can also switch up that thinking and think, okay, what are these students going to be doing when they're finally in management positions? It's a long game, but I think it can also have a huge impact.
Yeah, it's
Family business, right? The family
Yeah.
business is a good example. They make different decisions because it's a family business, and you have to think about next generations. And yeah, there's a whole theory around, I think it's called, I think they gave it the name, which is an awful name, I think, but it's quantum leadership or something like that.
mm,
And it is actually this idea of synchronicity as well, this idea of everything is connected to everything, but also
mhm,
connected to, so you as a company, you are kind of influencing different things, different communities, if you will, in at the same time. So it's you as a company with your employers, but also their communities, their families and where they're from. And this sense of we are influencing all of that, and we are responsible for all of that. So and also over time. So also like, there are lots of, I'm not sure if that's typically sort of an Asian way of looking at it anymore, but it used to be more Asian, where I think there were some Japanese companies that would have a strategy for the next 100 years. So
mhm,
you look at beyond your lifetime,
Mhm.
and I think that is such a, so and maybe a little bit to what you were saying, that this idea of like I'm just a little speck, in the whole, the whole system and in time, but that can also give you sort of a sense of being happy with what you achieved right now, because I think a lot of people are not happy because they have to be a billionaire, otherwise they are not successful, and so they're going to rush really and work really hard to get this kind of whatever they think makes them happy. But if you can be happy with this idea that what you have built will influence other generations and other generations, and that will give you a sense of satisfaction, I think that is, for me, that's the way to go. You're like, but so you plant little seeds, change happens one person at a time. Teachers are the heroes. I mean, if you teach someone, and they might not even understand what you're saying, they might go like, is this therapy? I
My
don't like
favorite
this.
is when my
This is
favorite when
actually
students come back and they say, I understand what you mean
yeah,
now.
that's the
exactly.
best.
It's really
But
good.
that's what you've done, right? So because that feeling that you might not understand now, because now you're maybe too young,
Mhm,
but in 10 years time or 20 years time or wherever, you go like,
mhm.
oh, that was,
Yeah.
that was really important. Yeah, because you will change their brain, and you will change
Yeah.
their thinking, because you gave them
Mhm,
an example, you gave them different options, you gave them, something that might not land straight away, but it's there. So I think,
mhm,
this idea of having to have everything now, right now, that is the problem we have. I think that's the problem we have with companies, with just with whatever,
mhm,
the way we think about business and success, right? Because I think that's a destructive way of living.
mhm. Yeah, they want to uncover they're like bulldozing the stones to uncover all the possibilities. They're not like picking them up and like being
Yeah.
like, what a beautiful stone.
And that metaphor is so lovely, because it really is how it works, right? Like
Mhm,
you've always been there, but you haven't yet uncovered the
mhm,
stones. And my favorite is when I uncover a new stone about
mhm.
myself, especially because it doesn't happen as often. When I don't know, as I get
Yeah.
older, it feels like it's, more, yeah. So have there been any like new stones about yourself that you've uncovered lately?
Oh gosh. That's another like giant question. Any new stones about myself lately? I think I'm in the process of like still working through things that I uncovered a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
what
mean, I
about the
think,
well, yeah, I want to know all of those things too, but but I also want to kind of, I'm interested in the stones, because you're
oh,
not, I'm
I
not
keep
talking about
talking
that.
about it.
Yeah, because you bring up this, we hear you, finally. Yeah. So what about, yeah, so what is the, is it a metaphor, or is it a actual exercise? Is it, what do you mean when you talk about stone?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess in that reference, I was just kind of referencing back to that, uncovering of the different affordances of yourself. I think for me, the stone is just kind of a representation of like our connection to the earth in a way. And I also think it's a really another like beautiful thing to remember of time. Like so many of the rocks around us have existed for maybe even like millions and millions and millions of years. And we don't, in our modern society, we do not aren't confronted by that connection to time ever really. It's like our
Yeah.
societies are built on top. It's like everything's just like layer by layer by layer. And I think I collect rocks and I'm actually doing a rock workshop in a couple weeks. And it's actually just a personal thing, not so much a thread in my like professional or like practice. Seeps in, of
But
course, because it's
but there
all the
was no
same.
difference.
It's all the same.
Yes,
I know.
I caught you.
I was, no, no, no. I was going to address that.
Wait a
It
minute.
is,
Wait a
it is
minute.
a practice that I have kept for myself that I have not put on social media before. Basically, is kind of how I think about it. It is now on social
Yeah.
media as an
Oh boy.
advertising because I'm doing a new rock workshop. But I think that it's just this, to me, it's this reminder of time and the balance between it's like we as humans are, you know, mastering Earth. Like it's like we're moving Earth. We think that it's like so many, even just moving through the day, even if you care about sustainability and environmentalism, you're still making all of these compromises every second. And that still is a little bit of this like human on top of earth in the hierarchy, regardless. And I think that the like stone as a metaphor is a reminder of like that million-year-old stone knows way more than you do. Like, and it's going to be here when you're gone too. And so I think that's just a nice kind of just metaphor. I think it's mostly just kind of fun as like something that it feels like a really tangible way to think about uncovering these very intangible things that happen in our mind. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. That's power. It's powerful, and it's just because we take these kind of things for granted. I mean, it's just it's such a, I think it's really powerful if you, because it's sort of also teaching people to reflect on things that typically we don't reflect on,
Yeah.
because it's just like it's a rock, and but it means so much. Actually, it's so much older than you, or like exactly what you were saying. This is just thought that this rock is going to be here like
Way
way
longer.
longer than you are. That is confrontational, but it's also, I don't know. I think it's a nice. That's actually a really cool exercise. Sorry, my brain goes like, I can add that into my workshops. Just
Yeah.
kind of have that, have rocks, and then just this feeling of that. It's really grounding, right?
Hmm.
Instead of you are here as your function, or in the job that you have, and oh no, wait, here's a rock.
Yeah.
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 Who are you?
I wish
Yeah.
you could come to my emotional support rock
Uh,
workshop in New York on the
I saw
26th.
I saw the advertisement for it. I
the
really wish I
26th?
could be there.
That'd be
No,
awesome. I would love to. Yeah, would love to. No, seriously, I would
no,
love
no,
to.
it's too bad. Yeah.
26 is a little bit, I don't know.
It's a little soon. It's a little soon for
I have
international travel.
yeah, yeah, maybe, yeah. I have a sort of a New York, and actually Parsons story that is
Oh.
similar to that, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna,
Mm.
should I tell
Uh,
that, Morgan? No,
no, no.
too much about me. No, keep
But
that a
he's been
secret.
to Parsons and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
Not for it wasn't a rock. It was kind of like a rock, session, but anyway, yes. rock stars.
Yes, more rock stars, yes.
Yeah. Next time. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, I would love to kind of talk a little bit about, not just not just the because we talked about the future a little bit, but still, it's just also the now and the things that are changing. Because I think, and I really like your kind of perception, also perspective as a being an artist, designer, teacher, because it means that you kind of have probably kind of a feeling for different kind of worlds, if you will. Because when you're in education and when you're an artist and so what is changing? What is changing right now? Where are we going? What is happening? Because I hear a lot of people in sort of in at least in my networks saying, they're a bit lost. Like they don't really know what's happening. The market is difficult. There's AI. There's all kind of
Hmm.
there's a little bit of anxiety. Some clients of mine are a bit nervous about the future because they can't predict the future anymore, as if they could, I mean, ever. But so
Exactly. That's
yeah,
what's changing. They're realizing they can't predict the future.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I definitely can't, I don't feel that I can speak with a ton of authority on this subject in terms of I am so deliberately place myself outside of the industry sometimes where I feel that, and I like that. I mean, from the little bits that I've heard of the podcast too, is like speaking to so many different outsiders, right? And I
mm,
definitely I feel that I have positioned myself as an outsider in a lot of these disciplines deliberately, and so I can only really feel like I can speak with authority in terms of like what I'm seeing with the students. And of course, like a bit of with how the faculty is changing, how my friends who are designers and artists. And I think that there's that feeling of loss and feeling lost is so prevalent. It's like I'm seeing that all over. And what that communicates to me a little bit is a bit more of an awakening, of a questioning of, if even like before the pandemic, a little bit less feeling of loss. And that's because people still felt like they can predict the future, that you have a little bit more control, or that you're looking at the stats and you can predict all these different things about what's going to happen. And in many ways, like the feeling lost is progress and shifting because there's like an awakening of questioning. And definitely one of the things that I'm seeing amongst even just the conversations of in some of my social circles, and which is obviously very small, is just this bigger call for community and connection and mutual care. And so many of my friends are like, but what if we lived in a different way? What if we like rethought what community means? What if we were rethinking what care means? And I think the students are really hungry for that, of challenging a lot of the systems that exist in their world that they feel are separating people, and kind of being like, okay, how do we create more care now? And that impacts the future positively, and sitting in the uncertainty. And so I guess it's like, yeah, that feeling of lost and questioning signifies progress to me. And of course, it's just going to be how people harness that. I don't know. That's isn't necessarily like a super concrete answer. But I mean, I'm
yeah,
hoping that that questioning then leads to more space for people who have been much more underrepresented in
mm,
design and art and all of that, too, because in many ways those people are the ones who've been dealing with that questioning and that uncertainty for a lot longer. They have so much more knowledge on how to navigate through that, and I think that that hopefully will and of contribute to finding space through. And of course, this feels like a very optimistic answer in some ways. But yeah, I guess, is that a
yeah.
little
I don't
bit?
know if it's optimistic. I almost get the feeling that we are in a way, not all of us probably, but a lot of us are going through some kind of a grief cycle.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
actually an interesting thought. I never thought about that. So because we don't even know we're in it.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
the phrase the Great Awakening is, I hear
Mhm.
mentioned with this time as well. And if you think about it, right, you're waking up to something that if you were having a dream and you wake up, right, like your reality has shifted and now you have to reorient to this new
Mhm.
landscape. But then it's also positioning, hey, it's no longer like that. So as you're stating, then the progress from that. But
Yeah. I mean, it's like all the cycles of history, of course. It's like we're
Mm,
kind of re-entering, kind of at least in the US, like the 60s, like kind of going through those different cycles. And yeah, but I think that feeling and that like mass grief, and this is something that I often see, like it comes up frequently when I'm sitting in like a faculty meeting or even just like listening to certain news articles, and there's all these discussions of like, why is this happening? Why, like, what's going on? And I'll find myself being like, it's because we are still dealing with grief. Like, we're still
right.
dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with horrible wars going on. It's like, there's always this kind of like meta human. And that's why I think conversations about embodiment and deeply questioning our emotions and understanding those connections too, and bringing that more into a conversation about like modern society. It's like, no, the meta thing is like, we're in deep grief. Of
Yeah.
course, people are acting this way. That's what happens. Or
Yeah.
there's violence going on. Of course, we're acting this way. Why
Yeah.
are we kind of defining the like little minutia points of these political events when the reality is we're having these extreme human responses to things and we need to know how to name that. So that's yeah.
Yeah, and you can recognize all the stages of this grief cycle, right? And it's not in an orderly fashion. It's not like first we
Mhm.
go through one, so it's all at once almost.
Mhm.
Some people are
yeah.
in this anger, and some people are still kind of they just don't want to see it, and and we're not in the acceptance stage, I think, because if we ever get there. But I think that kind of is just, I don't know. I want to say that's a nice way of putting it. I'm not sure if it's nice, but but it clarifies something for me at least. This idea that we're in a grief cycle. So and there's this meta human experience. Because that's when you see patterns, right? You
Mhm.
go like, oh yeah, I see those patterns,
Mhm.
and we go through these waves, and it's natural. It's a natural. I really I know I'm not a scientist, so I'm actually not allowed to talk about this, but anyway, I love this concept of the edge of chaos.
Mm.
And basically, it's how scientists kind of try to explain evolution, but because it always goes from order to chaos and back again. And when there's chaos, that's when new connections are being made. It's the creative time. But when it's too chaotic, it falls apart.
Mhm.
There are no connection. But the creative time is when there's chaos, and then we start structuring things and building and creating order out of that, and then it becomes too orderly, and again it becomes disconnected
Mm,
because it's too structured, and
yeah.
then it falls back into chaos again, and then it's a creative period. So, and it's not like we're always in chaos and in the structured period at the same
Mhm.
time,
And
but sometimes
yeah.
there's a little bit more chaos, and I think we are now in a moment of chaos, which is also my favorite moment, because I love, as creatives, we need chaos, because this is when new things emerge and new connections can be made. And you go like, huh, but we need, so actually we're going back to your teaching, this moment of reflection and going like, what's really going on? And who am I in it? And what do I actually
Mhm.
feel? And what do I actually see, instead of just keep going, going, going. And yeah, sorry, Morgan, you.
Yeah, well, I had mentioned like the in the United States, it feels a bit like you're back in the 60s, with all of and I imagine you're referring to a bit like the social movements happening and stuff, right? Okay.
Mhm.
So there's this concept of like I think it's the historical cycles. Is this what it's called? Or like there's 8 historical cycles or something? Is this what it is?
I don't know if that's the exact term, but yeah,
Some
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And when
Mhm.
I watch this, it was so interesting to see the patterns and to explain. And they say, because this just happened, the next cycle will look like this. And
Hmm.
when you watch, when you see it explained to you, you're like, that makes perfect sense. And so kind of like there's these 8 phases that tend to happen historically
Hmm.
over and over and over again. And you can really see that one is yeah, preceded by the other and that they're playing off of each other. And that really fascinated me because it kind of also gave me hope. Like, okay, we've been here before. The world's not falling to pieces. It'll be chaotic, but that's also exciting. And, we'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
I
Yeah.
think it's the 80 years cycle. There's like
Oh, yes,
80-year
that's what it is.
cycle of
The 80-year
war. Yeah.
cycle. Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. So that's, yeah, I know, that's kind of an idea that things return. So 80 years ago, we had similar situations, and
Yeah.
which is, I don't know if that, it's also a bit depressing, really. Really,
Well,
Yeah.
do we
yeah.
ever learn, oh,
It's hard to be able to hold that in your mind while also dealing with the day to day and those types of, that tension between viewing something as a cycle and this kind of mass, more like meta event doesn't take into account like each of those numbers is a person. And so that like the tension between the individual and the care that is required and action that's required every day, as opposed to being able to sit in that kind of
Yeah. Great
knowledge
point.
is so it's impossible. And that's definitely something that the pandemic taught us also of, you know, like only this many people died today. And you're like, okay, well, great government, thank you. And the same things that's happening right now where they're like we're
Yeah.
saying numbers of deaths and you're like, I know that number's wrong, and also what, like how is that
yeah.
and so I think that that
Mhm.
tension is so challenging, and that's again why like it's so hard to be a human at this point in time. With we've never, I think, I forget the exact fact, but it was just like we're bombarded with more information in one day or even just like
Mm,
a couple hours than any that you would have had in your entire lifetime before
Yeah.
the internet. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
exactly.
We were
Mhm.
not made for
Yeah.
global information consumption.
No, but AI can take over, right? They can basically talk to AI, let AI talk to AI. You can already do this, right? You can have ChatGPT talk
Yeah.
to ChatGPT. It's great, and you can just leave them alone. It's fine.
They'll
You
figure
know,
it out.
it's just like, yeah, you can do it, and then you go do other things, make art.
Yeah.
So actually, this 80-year cycle is interesting. Also, because we talked a little bit about this having, this impact and just being this kind of can you actually, and things take such a long time, but at the same time, 80 years sounds like a long time. Maybe my father's 87, by the way. It's also like they talk about like 4 generations or so
Mm.
of people. And then in a way, it's such a short period of time, really. So it is really, I mean, but if you think about 80 years ago, I mean, when my father was a
Mhm.
kid, I mean, the world looked completely different,
Yeah.
right? It was a time where I think so my grandfather, he was the first person with a car because he had a shop in the street. So nobody had cars. He had a little car because he had a shop. And people started kind of thinking about taking, going on vacation with an airplane. His idea
Mm.
was what nobody was doing it, but only very, very wealthy people. They had they had a phone, but I mean, so many things when my father was a kid, you know, that we do now it would have been science fiction, obviously. But when I was a kid and they asked me to make a drawing of the year 2000, I was drawing flying cars. I think we all did. This, we and in a way we didn't get those. I mean, I think they're kind of flying cars, but we didn't get those. But we get other things. So it's interesting how, although we can imagine a future and we can design together, we can design a future, we can change, the way the world looks in the future. But I think that because we are so disconnected as humans, right? So because you have a group of people in the room, nobody, you know, we don't know what the other person is thinking. So you get this arms race, in businesses, for instance. If we don't do it, they will do it. So let's, so we'll do it. So this complete disconnect, in a way, that makes things difficult to change, because what if we can start creating products that are more sustainable, they will be more expensive. Yeah, but if we're the only ones doing it, so what, we'll just wait what the competition will do. This kind of attitude. So in a way, this meta human experience, maybe there's something, in our, because we're not, if you think about us as humans evolving over time, we're not like the end point, I hope.
I hope not.
Like,
Gosh,
No.
this is it. Like, this is it. This is the thing we
Yeah.
became.
this is as good as it
As
gets.
good as it gets. So I kind of hope that somehow we kind of find out how to kind of connect, because I do believe that most people are good people, that we all kind of want, we all want the same things, really. Simple things, actually. I think we all really want simple things: family, community, friendship, food, being healthy, being happy every now and then, kind
Yeah.
of. I mean, it's very basic. I think we, I don't think, deep down, nobody really wants, to be some kind of a billionaire tycoon and with a huge company, and all those things, all those material kind of, I don't think deep down we want that. What we really want is way more basic. I don't know. I think there's hope, but it's going to take such a long time. By the
Yeah.
way, the book I mentioned earlier was The Extended Mind, The Power of Thinking Outside the Brain.
Is it, who is it? If it's the
The
same.
author is
Oh,
Annie Murphy Paul.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth reading. It's one of those books where you go, huh, never thought about it that way. That's so, which are good.
Mhm.
Whether you agree with it or not, but it gives you an option. And so
Mhm.
to that point, I think you are, again, one of those people that we talk to quite often, that you actually even call yourself an outsider. And I think there are a lot of outsiders and a lot of
Mhm.
people who might not know it yet, but they are outsiders, and they're struggling because they don't know
Mhm.
they're outsiders and they want to be insiders. But I think the world needs outsiders, because they are the people that they connect the different worlds. They kind of,
What's your elevator pitch for being an outsider?
Me?
Yeah.
Obviously me, sorry. I think I forget the exact person who said this, unfortunately, but let's see, let me try to give me like 1 second to think about who this is. I mean, I think that the elevator pitches, and this has been proven, or I've seen this kind of time and time again, it's that if you want to make, and not everyone wants to make change. So I think that that's like,
True.
this is the elevator pitch from my perspective. And I don't think all our outsiders necessarily want to make change within the larger society. So I don't think that this is a blanket statement. But I think it's, if you really want to make change in the world or in a specific discipline, you can only do it in small increments from the inside. And you have to kind of work in these small increments from within the inside. But if you want to make change or think about things more broadly and make radical shifts, often that needs to happen outside and can be brought back in. And in terms of shown and told and kind of experienced. But so to me, like sitting outside of that is necessary and important to be asking some of these broader questions. And if you allow yourself to be kind of more succinct, like within that, it's difficult to break through those walls. And so I think for me, that is like a little bit more my pitch for doing that. Yeah, I think that's
cool.
Yeah. Really cool. Really cool. And when you think of the future, of your future or the general broad future, what is something you're excited about?
um I think, again, just to speak from my perspective, something that I'm really excited about in my own future is just continuing to make a lot of what we spoke about, to bringing like really working to name and uncover and define like these intangible human experiences more directly, and to hopefully, I mean, one of my goals is to have my own kind of experimental school, and that's something that I've been like slowly chipping away at. And so I think this relates really well to the Great Awakening and people kind of being able to sit in this discomfort more. And I think that I'm kind of just excited to figure out ways out of that, and ways that I can bring other people in to also multiply all of the different ways that we can kind of pull ourselves as humans out of that. And so working towards that goal, I think, is something that I'm really excited about. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so much to think about. So inspirational. Thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Of course.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Thank you.